Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, and esteemed guests both here in Washington and joining us via webcast. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Wilson Center, and on behalf of Wilson President and CEO Ambassador Mark Green, to convene today's important event focused on the significance of the 9th Our Ocean Conference, which takes place April 15th through 17th this year in Greece. Now, Ambassador Green would remind you how proud we are here at Wilson, being congressionally chartered, scholarship-driven, and fiercely nonpartisan. I'm Ambassador Philip Rieker. I chair the Global Europe program here at the Wilson Center. Global Europe program addresses vital issues affecting the European continent, US-EU relations, and broader European relations and Europe's ties with the rest of the world, including European approaches to critical global issues, from climate to migration and global governance. We are delighted with our partnership now with the Embassy of Greece here in Washington, and it's a pleasure to recognize the Ambassador of Greece to the United States, Ekaterini Nasika, along with special guests, the Ambassador of Slovenia, Istok Mirsic, the Ambassador of Croatia, Pierre Simunovic, and other distinguished guests who are joining us today. And it's a particular honor to welcome Greek Foreign Minister George Gerapetridis to the Wilson Center, and to welcome back Secretary John Kerry, the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. It's an honor to see you both here. Our distinguished guests are joined here by Lauren Herzer-Risi, Director of the Environmental Change and Security Program here at the Wilson Center. Now, some may remember that a year ago we convened a discussion in advance of the 8th Our Ocean Conference, which was held in Panama, with the Panamanian Foreign Minister. And Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change, John Kerry, joined us along with NOAA Administrator Spinrad to focus on the challenges facing our oceans. Now, the Our Oceans Conference, launched in 2014 by Secretary Kerry, has emerged as a vital platform for international collaboration, bringing together nations, experts, and advocates to address the pressing issues affecting our oceans. What is more global than the oceans? Not only a source of immense biodiversity, but also playing a crucial role in regulating the global climate, in global food security, and the economic well-being of communities and countries around the globe. So you can't have smart foreign policy without smart ocean policy. And just a few words on Wilson Center's ocean-related work that can illustrate how integral the ocean is to foreign policy and global stability. Our Polar Institute continues its important work to advance U.S. priorities in the Arctic and the Southern Oceans. In partnership with the Department of State, the Latin America program is supporting the Eastern Tropical Pacific Marine Corridor, a historic marine protected area. Our China Environment Forum is addressing plastic and other pollution that's harming our ocean ecosystems in Southeast Asia and China. And with our Serious Games initiative, we've created an educational video game called The Plastic Pipeline that engages players to learn about policies to keep plastic from leaking into the ocean and broader environment. So your presence here today, gentlemen and ladies, underscores the significance of our shared commitment to addressing the challenges facing our oceans. I want to thank our distinguished guests again for being with us today, and I will turn the word over to the Foreign Minister of Greece, George Gerapetridis. Thank you.
It is such a great honor for me to be here, and I would like wholeheartedly to thank Wilson Center for this kind invitation. It's a unique opportunity to be among distinguished people and distinguished friends, but also to be on the same panel with John Kerry, who has been the heart of global efforts as President Biden's Special Envoy for the Environment in order to preserve what is the most valuable asset that we have on Earth, something that does not belong to us, that belongs to the future generations, and we need to take a proper dividend of this environment in order for sustainability to prevail. It is also a great pleasure because, dear Secretary, I am trying to promote the 9th Our Ocean Conference that we will host in Athens on the 16th and 17th of April. It's a major event, and I think the timing is of particular significance because it comes right after COP28 and the tangible results that have been produced thereof. And I think it is of utmost importance to actually try and keep up a positive momentum, not only among state actors, but also among private individuals, amongst NGOs, among enterprises, and obviously among think tanks and scientists. In Greece, with an extended coastline of more than 20,000 kilometers, including numerous small islands, almost 30,000 small islands and islets, and because of its inextricable historical, cultural, and economic link with the sea, we, as Greeks, have a firm commitment to protect the marine environment. It has been 10 years since the first Our Ocean Conference was organized after Secretary Scary's initial idea, an idea that proved to be inspirational for the international community as a whole, and that created a new results-oriented model, which should be the basis of any action against climate change. By hosting the 9th Our Ocean Conference that we entitle An Ocean of Potential, Greece would like to continue and further your precious efforts, Mr. Secretary, in the same direction. The past few months have been extremely dense as we started and still carry on an intense campaign about these events, a campaign to raise awareness and communicate the main messages of the conference to the highest possible level, as well as to facilitate the participation of leaders from small island developing states. However, nothing can be achieved without the active engagement of the future of our planet, our youth. The Youth Leadership Summit of Our Ocean Conference will be held on April 15th, the day prior to the inauguration of our conference. By involving young voices, that is the future of the planet, the conference aims to harness fresh perspective and innovative ideas, but also to be inclusive in terms of the participants, because it is, after all, about the youth and the future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, Greece, through the Athens conference, aspires to reaffirm its commitment for transition to a blue economy and to utilize the advantages of a new balance between economic growth, social cohesion, and sustainability. We envision a future where the oceans thrive as resilient and vibrant ecosystems, ensuring their well-being for generations to come, and through shared global action, we aspire to achieve an outcome that will meet the level of ocean ambition the world needs today. Our goal is to mobilize concrete action and to announce tangible commitments globally and regionally. During the latest Our Ocean Conference in Panama in 2023, it became widely known that since its beginning in 2014, the conference has mobilized more than 2,160 commitments worth more than $130 billion. Next April, Greece is looking forward to further expanding these commitments and to promoting new and more ambitious actions. Greece is, in its efforts to enrich the conference's agenda, will seek to place emphasis on 4 cross-cutting aspects across 6 areas of actions of this conference. The first is sustainable tourism in coastal areas and islands, to ensure an optimal balance between tourism and development. This is of particular concern for us Greeks because of the touristic nature of our economy, marine environment, conservation, and overall sustainability of host communities, and a core driver to build resilience. Secondly, green shipping, which encompasses a range of actions to enforce emission control, promote decarbonization, and move towards a more sustainable shipping management with the aim of minimizing the overall impact of the marine environment. You all know that Greece has been a very strong maritime nation, and it is of utmost importance for us to develop that type of green shipping. Thirdly, reduction of marine plastic and microplastic pollution. This is an imperative task since this type of pollution affects negatively marine ecosystems and may also harm human health through seafood consumptions. Fourthly, the green transition in the Mediterranean, a sea connecting 3 continents and serving as crossroad of several cultures, people, and civilizations. It is a key challenge which can deliver significant benefits for marine ecosystems. We all know that the Mediterranean basin has been the environmental hotspot of the last decade. We need to take some immediate action. Ladies and gentlemen, the ocean is the foundation of life on Earth and the heartbeat of our planet. The ocean forms an important part of our natural and cultural heritage and plays an essential role in a sustainable development that could eradicate poverty. We are therefore deeply alarmed by the global emergency the oceans are facing. Sea levels are rising, coastal erosion is worsening, and the oceans become warmer and more acidic. Moreover, marine pollution is increasing at an alarming rate. A third of fish stocks are overexploited. Marine biodiversity continues to decrease, while alien invasive species pose a significant threat to marine ecosystems and resources. We must act promptly and move towards a new development model, a new blue economy. We need to respond swiftly and decisively to the world's climate and environmental challenges. In Greece, we're currently implementing a green transformation of our economy, which is a very ambitious task that we have set in our government. We are seeking solutions towards improving policy, governance, technology, and finance through accelerated action for a clean and healthy ocean where protection and sustainable use go hand to hand. With respect to nature conservation, Greece is dedicated to protect 30% of its land and sea by 2030, to reduce overfishing, and to promote sustainable fishing management. Regarding pollution prevention, Greece is working constantly towards the promotion of sustainable materials and the reduction of plastic litter, microplastics, and single-use plastic products. In the field of climate action, Mr. Secretary, Greece is working towards our national climate law. Greece has been one of the few states in Europe that has introduced a climate law, and we have set very ambitious targets. At least 50% of greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030 and 80% by 2030. And eventually, we aspire to reach climate neutrality by 2050. The green transition can be the mainspring of economic growth, job creation, and sustainable development for local communities. Therefore, we have launched another strategic project for the future, which we entitled Greco Islands, GR-ECO Islands. It aims to transform Greek islands into innovation hubs and models of energy autonomy via green energy, energy efficiency, storage, e-mobility, and circular economy. There are 3 small islands that have already been incorporated into the project of Greco Islands, and we have a small island in Dodecanese, Tilos, which is now self-sufficient in terms of energy consumption, and it can gain some money from exporting the surplus of energy that it produces. Ladies and gentlemen, being a contracting party to all major international environmental conventions, treaties, and protocols, Greece has set the climate, peace, and security nexus as a priority for our candidacy for a non-permanent seat at the UN Security Council for 2025-2026. It is also noteworthy that the 9th Our Ocean Conference will be the first that it will convene after the adoption of the agreement on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond natural jurisdiction under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the BBNJ Treaty, covering more than 2/3 of the oceans. It will be a suitable event to discuss the means of implementation of the goals of the agreement. Furthermore, The Ninth Euro-Ocean Conference aims to keep the ocean issues on the top of the global political agenda, something that Mr. Secretary has done very successfully in the last 10 years and is expected to make a considerable direct contribution to the upcoming ocean-related high-level events at the UN level, which are to be held in Costa Rica in June 2024 and in Nice, France in June 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, in Greek mythology, Oceanus was the son of Uranus and Gaia. Uranus the sky and Gaia the earth. He was a Titan, which was the strongest group of gods in the ancient mythology. And Oceanus was considered to be the leader, the begetter of the gods by many. This is the value that ancient Greeks attributed to oceans, and this is a good opportunity to actually revisit our stance towards seas and oceans. The oceans offer enormous opportunity and untapped potential. We must find real and sustainable solutions to all challenges because, after all, as we say, oceans and seas connect us all. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here with us, and thank you to the Wilson Center for making itself available and convening this initial, almost beginning of the Ocean Conference. Excuse me. I want to thank our good friend and the eloquent foreign minister from Greece. We are really pleased to have Minister Europatridis here, who's here partly for the security discussions that will take place with the United States formally. It's a regular event. But he personally wanted to take the time out to be able to make sure people understood how committed and excited Greece is about hosting the Our Ocean Conference in April. And we couldn't be more pleased. Mr. Foreign Minister, I think your comments were brilliant, extensive, and you even drew on the gods of Greece. I was wondering how long it would take to get them in there. But we really appreciate very, very much the leadership of Greece. This is going to be a great conference. I have absolute confidence, and we are genuinely anticipating the many things that are going to take place when we do get to Athens in April. I personally look forward to being at the Youth Summit, which I think is really one of the most exciting parts of it, energizing and important, because we need to enlist the next generation in this endeavor. And I think all around the world, increasingly, young people are deeply concerned about plastic, about what's happening in the ocean, about fisheries, and every aspect of the climate crisis. Young folks are rightfully angry and disappointed that adults have not behaved like adults and gotten the job done yet. So we have major responsibilities. Madam Ambassador, great to see you here. Ambassador Nasika, I see you're sitting beside your cousin, who works for me, ladies and gentlemen. And I want you to know I did not arrange this moment of nepotism. It's totally natural, but we welcome it. Xander Nasikas has been working for me since almost the first days of this initiative, and he's been doing a terrific job. Let me just say to everybody, because I'm trying to adjust my comments slightly based on what His Excellency has said to you. First of all, this is the 9th conference, even though we have been at it for 10 years, because we kind of had our own COVID leap year. And we missed one session, but I think we didn't miss a beat in terms of what we picked up with Palau and with Panama. We're grateful to them for their leadership. But look, it's just the fundamental reality of this challenge. 3/4 of our planet is ocean. 3/4. And I'm sure you react the way I have for years as a kid when I was younger and up until sort of a new awakening about the ocean, that we have this sense of inviolatability about the ocean. It's so vast. It's so huge. How can we, meager human beings, possibly put an entire complex of oceans and seas all around this planet at risk? How could we do that? Well, we can do that because human beings have proven themselves incredibly capable of succumbing to indifference, to greed, to money, to self-interest, with the result that we are seeing in the fisheries of the world the strip mining of the ocean, literally. Monofilament nets that we tried to outlaw at the UN a number of years ago that go out for 1,000 miles. And they break off sometimes, and then they wind up fishing as what we call ghost nets. They fill up with fish till they're dragged down by the weight, and then it turns around and floats back up to the surface. And the fact is that if you look at the stocks of our fisheries all around the world, they're at risk. They're at risk for any number of reasons. 450 million Chinese have discovered sushi. At the rate that we are now heading, folks, you can probably tag the moment where blue tuna will become extinct. That's what's happening. Too much money, chasing too few fish. And it continues. And so it's not just, there are also thousands of illegal fishing vessels out on those seas, which is why the High Seas Treaty is so important, that we have to be able to begin to police and enforce. And it doesn't do us any good just to announce a new marine protected area, but there's no protection for the area. And people are willfully going in their small boats and coming out to these factory ships and filling them up, and then they go into a port and fill up a 747 that flies to the capital of a country and pours out the fish, and people are happy. But they won't be for long at the rate that we're going. Ulysses is reputed to have said that the ocean is the source of everything, all life. And it's interesting that the three major religions of the planet, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all in their scriptures refer to the responsibility of human beings to caretake this planet, to guard and to protect and to nurture. The opposite of what we're actually doing. Not everybody, because there are lots of folks out there. By the way, the philosophies of life, whether you're talking about Hinduism or Native American lore and so forth, all has particular respect for your surroundings, for your environment, for your planet. And so we need to find greater effort that links the ocean to the importance that it has. The majority of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. And the fact is that we're currently treating it with such disrespect in so many ways. There are over 500 dead zones around the planet where nothing lives in the vicinity of that particular dead zone. At the mouth of the Mississippi is one, for instance. Why? Because all the nitrates that are used in fertilizers that flow off of the farms of Ohio and Minnesota and Iowa and places rushes down through the Missouri River, the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, out at the mouth of the Mississippi, and it kills. The nitrates suck the oxygen out. There's no oxygen, there's no life. So we have a responsibility here to try to, particularly in the wake of the sustainability agreement, which we have reached, is to actually practice sustainability, to put it into workability. And so this Oceans Conference, which we conceived of back in 2014 when I was secretary, began with the notion it's not just going to be a conference where you get together and jab and talk. It's a conference where we're going to galvanize action. And at the heart of the conference, historically, has been a continuing process during the conference of people standing up and making commitments and talking about what they're going to do in order to right the wrong. And that has, in fact, happened in a remarkable way. The scale of announcements and the resources that this conference has generated make it stand out as a singular kind of conference, but also it really underscores why I find this one of the most exciting and important things that I've been privileged to be able to be involved in since I became Secretary of State and then a special presidential envoy for climate. And we have now a total of about 2,100 announcements that have been made of individual initiatives people are engaged in around the planet, worth, and this is a combination of actual grant money from philanthropies and countries, but also in terms of value of what is being done, worth $128 billion, folks, far exceeding anything that we had imagined in the beginning. It also stands out because of the magnitude and scale that it addresses, including in relation to the ocean climate nexus. Let me say just a quick word about that. Most people say, oh, we have a climate crisis over here, and now Kerry's here telling us maybe we also have an ocean crisis. No, it's one and the same. And that's what people need to understand. Why is one of the reasons, principal reasons the ocean is in crisis is that you have the reality that in the warming, and we all know last year was the warmest in history and records broken everywhere. Well, guess what? 90% of the warming of the planet goes into the ocean. And that 90% of warming is having a profound effect on the coral reefs, on spawning grounds, on fisheries, fishing stocks, normal patterns, and on currents of the ocean, particularly confounded by the rapid melting of the sea ice and of the Greenland ice sheet, et cetera, which crushes this cold water down and into confrontation with the Gulf Stream. And you even have scientists now speculating about the potential that the Gulf Stream might be diverted, which, since it is controlling weather, has a profound impact on Europe, Britain, Greenland, Ireland, and the north of the United States, or most of the United States. So we have to think about these things. We really have to link these things, and we haven't been. And so the other reason that it's so critical is the heat that goes into the ocean increases the amount of moisture that goes up into the atmosphere. And that moisture is what we are seeing in these flooding rainstorms, these bombs of rain that occur, a year's worth of water in one day or in hours. And that is also what produces the raising of the acidity of the ocean, because you have the coal dust, the burning of fossil fuel, that is the greenhouse gas that goes up there, pouring down into the ocean, and that raises the acidity of the ocean. So it's all connected, and they are all human choices or absence of choices. And that's what we hope to wake people up to in the course of this conference. So we got to really use this conference to push, and push hard. I think that we all understand that really in the end, this relies on we humans to govern ourselves more effectively, to make better choices. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice. You're not going to be able to eat fish. We've proven again and again that when we are managing our fisheries intelligently, we have ongoing capacity to have sustainable fishing. That can happen. And more now we're seeing, farming on the coastline and farming in peninsulas that are close to the ocean, and that's going to change also the availability of our fisheries. So the Ocean Conference has been a place where the most powerful part of it has been the broad range of topics that it encompasses, specifically accelerating maritime decarbonization. I just talked about it. Building out new green shipping corridors. Critical component is what we've been able to do with shipping. I've said many times, if shipping were a nation, it would be the 8th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. It's not a nation. It's obviously disparate around the world. But now shipping has come to the table. Maersk, Yara, MSC, these guys are all doing amazing things. And so we have reason to hope that the shipping industry is going to turn over its current set of diesel and other powered ships into being decarbonized shipping within the next 20 years, which meets our targets in terms of 2050. So I'm encouraged and excited by the responsibility being shown. We're also working on 30 by 30. We're working on taking action to counter the illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing that is taking place as a means of having a sustainable fishery for the planet. We're also looking at many ways to deal with the problem of plastic. I don't know how many of you know this, but the human being is now involuntarily imbibing plastic, microplastics, at a rate that is alarming the health community because they see much greater levels of cancer in young people than they have previously. And they believe, I'm not sure it's finished in terms of all the pedagogy, but they believe that this is obviously related. Now, if you enjoy eating one credit card of plastic per week, continue. But I don't. And I think we need to do better on that. So there's a lot more to talk about. Come to the Ocean Conference and you'll hear all about it. It's going to be a really fact-filled, action-filled, and particularly enjoyable experience for a lot of different reasons. But I think we need to do a better job of communicating to people the connection between ocean and life, ocean and our daily lives, ocean and the prospects for the future, ocean and the solution to the climate crisis. And that's what this conference is all about. Thanks. Lauren, thank you for doing this.
It's my honor. Gentlemen, let me add my welcome and gratitude for your leadership. Mr. Eupatritis, let's start with you. Greece, just as you mentioned in your remarks, Greece has been telling the story of the ocean's significance for millennia, and its continued leadership is so important on ocean protection. Our Ocean Conference focuses on 6 areas of action, which the Secretary touched on, and Greece will emphasize 4 cross-cutting themes, which you mentioned in your remarks: green shipping, sustainable tourism, reducing marine plastic and microplastic pollution, and the green transition in the Mediterranean. So drawing from your experience as a diplomat and as a scholar, how can those attending the conference work together to mobilize real action across so many critical areas of work? I think the Secretary's comments get at the sort of cross-cutting nature of the issues within the conference, but then also how they connect to some of these broader global challenges that we're seeing.
Thank you, Lauren. Secretary Kerry said something which is of utmost importance. This whole thing is anthropogenic. It comes from people. And we have to understand that the cause of the whole thing is the actual synergies of people. And in order to treat this, again, you need to have some horizontal synergies. It's not as if we can just, the governments get together and decide to reduce the ocean pollution. It's impossible. It's not as if we can decide that one day that, you know, even industries decide to reduce the carbon fuels used. We need to have a new and very fresh social deal that would involve all stakeholders. We need to mobilize people. We need to mobilize people in order to raise the awareness that the ocean pollution is strictly related to the environmental pollution altogether, that it has to do with the everyday life, because Lauren, the truth is that people do not realize that the ocean pollution is a vital issue. It's a vital issue for people because, it affects people with oxygens and everything. But the truth is that people conceive that the oceans are very far away. It's something really distant from their lives. It doesn't influence their lives in the way that other sources of pollution do apply and do influence their lives. We need to raise awareness about this, and we have consciously decided to employ in the forthcoming conference two very, very painful issues for us. The two cross-cutting themes, the first, sustainable maritime, and the second, sustainable tourism. They're both very painful for us Greeks because the truth is that a tremendous percentage of our income comes from maritime and from tourism. But we have consciously decided to deal with the whole situation and find a proper balance of how we deal with this situation in order to produce some sustainable results. Because just take, for example, the issue of small islands. Small islands are now in a state which are in huge danger, overpopulated with huge numbers of tourists in the summer. And you cannot stop that type of evolution. So we have to get local communities, industries, NGOs, and most importantly, young people all together to decide and find a golden rule when it comes to economy. And this is what we call blue economy. I was born, and I have very strong ties with my island. I was born on an island in Dodecanese, a relatively small island, not dramatically touristic, but touristic enough. And they almost hate me when I discuss about just reducing the number of tourists or moving towards a more sustainable model of tourism. And you understand this is something that not many people hear very easily, but this is why we need to have a very strong alliance. And the second painful issue is the green shipping, because Greece relies heavily on shipping, both in terms of economy, but also in terms of labor hands. So for us, it's absolutely crucial to have a very vibrant maritime fleet. But on the other hand, we see that this is untenable unless we switch to a more sustainable model. And to be honest, maritime ship owners, they do have good ears on this issue, and they want to contribute positively to switch to a more sustainable model, even if they have to make huge investments or to sometimes reduce the actual income they get. But you see, we need to have some foresighting on this, and this is the important thing we have to do, and this is why we call for a huge green alliance for the future.
That's great, thank you. Yes, and there's some challenges with the trade-offs that have to be made in these decisions, but having that sense of the bigger picture and a shared goal can help us make or sort of minimize those trade-offs. Secretary Kerry, since you started the conference in 2014, it's really grown in size and significance and in scope. So how, and I think you touched on this in your remarks, right? How deeply important all of these issues are. So how do we ensure that all of these issues that are affecting our ocean, that are being addressed by the conference, are integrated into the core of the work being undertaken by those in this room, by those watching online, but also those in the broader policy space who might not see the environment or oceans as their first priority?
Well, Lauren, the broader space is a tougher question because that's more of a mass media, question of reaching large numbers of people, educating people more effectively about these kinds of things. With respect to the community, the NGOs and lots of governments, there's now been a really remarkable seizing of the baton, if you will, and most of the NGOs, many of you are here representing NGOs, you don't need us to kick you into higher gear, and you don't need to be told how important it is. You're there and doing what you're doing because you understand it completely. The bigger question is really coordinating efforts and putting pressure on the governments and the private sector to understand this and to begin to act more responsibly. Resources for communications don't come easily from anybody's budget, but we need to do more in terms of communication. When I was a senator, which seems like a long time ago now, we started something in order to try to deal with this education problem. It was a philanthropy, which we created in order to educate people, educate the educators is really what we started to do. And it was called Second Nature. It still exists. And it was called Second Nature because we wanted it to become second nature, that if you were buying a house or building a house or whatever, you'd think about the materials you're using, think about where it is, think about the sewerage, think about all the connections. And people don't do that. And architects don't do that. People who are engineers and others who ought to be thinking about those things don't do that. There's no way to have a circular economy if you don't begin to think about the connections of these things. I mean, BMW a number of years ago decided to make cars that were completely recyclable. And I don't know if they get recycled, but that's thinking about a circular economy. And we have to think about that. We're 8 billion people on the planet today. We're going to be 10 billion people by about 20, 30, 40 in the lifetime of young people today. And look at what we're doing with resources. I don't think there is one country in the world living sustainably. And our country has probably one of the highest energy use rates against per capita of any place in the world. So we are really forced. It doesn't mean sacrificing your lifestyle. It means being smarter about how you're actually making it better, which is what we're talking about doing. Sustainability is better. Prices will be better. They'll be more stable. There'll be, the whole lot of things that come with that, jobs that are created in the doing of this. That's why this energy transition that we have ratified in Dubai, which is really a very significant leap forward in terms of the global efforts on climate, because the first time ever that 195 nations have agreed we need to transition away from fossil fuels in a just, equitable, fair manner so as to be able to achieve net zero by 2050 and reduce emissions according to the science, which means 1.5 degrees, folks. And we're going to blast through that on our current course. So it's about as urgent as it gets. I mean, it's hard to, but what people need to understand is it's not doomsday we're looking at. People will still be here, but life will be different. And shorelines will be different. And cities will, in many cases, disappear because of the rise of sea level at the rate we're going. So it's a question of thinking ahead and trying to implement policies that make sense. And I think more and more people are seizing that, Lauren. The NGOs don't need any kick into higher gear. What they really need is governments that are listening to them and actually implementing the policies that make sense, that will give you a better standard of living. We lose 7 million people a year, die because of greenhouse gas emissions, and it has an impact on lung diseases. And so we know this is happening. World Health Organization has measured this many times now. It's called pollution. We used to demand that the people who make the pollution pay for the pollution, but even that is not happening very much right now. So we got some big work to do, and this conference is sort of a part of all of that. But I think we're getting more and more people aware of the better choices that actually exist.
I think, if I may add something, Lauren, to what Secretary just mentioned, I think there is also an issue of ethical accountability of people. We need to realize, and this is sometimes a very painful realization on the part of mankind, that we're only caretakers of the earth and we're not owners of the earth. We need to understand that sustainability is not a policy choice, this is something that we do owe to the future generations. And this is mostly, I think, a conscious accountability that we need to develop. And I think this is why, alongside with all tangible policies, we need to stress the point of all ethical commitments behind all those tangible targeting, which is of utmost importance.
And I might add, and this will be shown very starkly, I think, in the Athens meeting, is that we originally had 6 pillars that we focused on, and marine protection and creating a sustainable economy, dealing with the climate components, maritime security, advancing the sustainable fisheries, and combating marine pollution. And added to that, Greece is going to have 4 other cross-cutting themes of green shipping, sustainable tourism in coastal areas, islands, reduction of marine plastic, microplastic, and the green transition in the Mediterranean specifically. So the efforts here are going to be really concentrated, disciplined, and there will be initiatives that are announced in every one of those sort of cross-cutting 6+4 areas of consideration.
That's great. Yeah, and I think, your point about the youth, I think there has been an evolution in how I see it in my kids and in my nieces and nephews and their friends, and how they think about the environment and how they think about the decisions that politicians are making and how they view these issues differently than I did as a kid, for example. And so we see that. It's just that the policies and the investments that the private sector are making are sort of need to catch up. So
I totally agree that youth is the key, because youth are stakeholders, but I think they could just exercise the strongest influence upon the policymakers, and I think they can be very convincing, because they're not only voters, but also they're very, they're our children and our families, and you just see all those young generations, and they're very vocal. So we have to rely on them. That's why we invited them in Athens. We're going to have a very strong youth association the day before the Ocean Conference, and we expect to have a very vibrant discussion. Not many opinion makers and leaders could tolerate having young people against them for a long time.
I think I'm sitting here thinking, scheming. I began my politics opposing the war in Vietnam and working on the first Earth Day back in the 1960s, where people were active and doing things. We should think about getting those young people to create on that day sort of a global day of the ocean. And with the internet now, everybody should be doing something around the world to call attention to what is happening in Athens.
That's a very good
is that
point.
April 15th?
And we should make,
April 15th.
let's encourage them, to make their voices felt on a global basis about all of this. And there's no reason why that shouldn't be able to happen.
An Ocean Day. That's
It's much easier to organize today than it was back then, folks. Anyway.
Mr. Yiapatritis, you mentioned in your remarks that through that conference in Athens, Greece is reaffirming its commitment to a blue economy, this prioritization of a sustainable use of ocean resources in ways that balance, economic growth, livelihoods, and the ocean ecosystem. So can you share a little bit more about the specific policies and initiatives that Greece is undertaking to realize this vision?
We do undertake a lot of policies in this respect, and we have made a fundamental decision to actually turn to blue economy in order not only to have a better quality of life, but also to have a better economy. The last 5 years, Greece economy has been developing immensely. And the truth is that it goes hand to hand with sustainability. As you probably know, Laureen, there is a new fund, a new European fund, a resilience fund, the RRF, which mobilizes a lot of funding for member states in order to deal with contemporary challenges. We in Greece decided to invest almost 40% of those funds, both subsidies and loans, upon green and blue economy. That was a very conscious decision, because we think as Secretary Kerry just mentioned, that it's not only about preservation, and it's not only about accountability and respect to future generations, but we also genuinely think that economy will develop better, more sustainable, and it will produce huge collateral benefits if we rely on green policies. And this is why we're investing heavily on these issues, and we expect to have very positive results in the near future. I mentioned especially the Greco Islands policy, which is for us almost an existential issue, but also I would like to stress the point of how Greece invests upon renewable energy sources. We have decided to significantly reduce any sort of carbon fuels. We're very proud that last year, 2023, there were months that we had more than 50% of the energy mix coming from renewables, which is, I think, an outstanding evolution. And we expect that by the end of this decade, by 2030, we will have almost 80% of the energy mix coming from renewables. We're very optimistic. As you all know, Greece is full of sun and wind, so we have to take advantage of it. But I think this is also the future. And now we're also planning to have a number of offshore parks, wind parks, in order to produce even in the seas. And we have a master plan of how we proceed. We're very hopeful. We rely on our plan, and we think that by 2040, which is for us the intermediate landmark year, we will be able to tell people that we have succeeded in reducing, in achieving our goals and reducing pollution by significant numbers.
That's great. Secretary Kerry, let's turn to the U.S. for a minute. I remember last year when you shared that stat about shipping being if it was a nation state, being the 8th largest emitter, and it's really one that sort of takes you aback. Our Ocean Conference has been a trailblazer in focusing on shipping and thinking about the importance of green shipping, and under Greece's leadership, the conference will continue to elevate that issue this year. So can you give us an update on what the U.S. is doing to advance ocean-based solutions, including green shipping, and what you hope this next conference will achieve?
Well, the U.S. actually has been very, very engaged on this front. I mentioned Yara, Maersk, and MSC. We've brought shippers to the table. We did this beginning with something called the First Movers Coalition, which we created in conjunction with the World Economic Forum. And we now have about 100 major corporations, the largest corporations in the world. I mean, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Salesforce, FedEx, Ford Motor Company, General Motors, I mean, really major companies, have agreed that they're going to buy green products and make moves that begin to send a signal to the marketplace. So we're affecting demand. We need demand to change, not just the supply of oil and gas and so forth, but the demand for it. And that is changing with electric vehicles we're pushing that. Because it all has to do with, lowering emissions, which will have an impact on saving the ocean, and so forth. It's all linked, as I mentioned earlier. But we are, I think, electric vehicle penetration in the United States is now up to about 4%. It'll be at about 7% by 2030 or before that. In Europe, it's about 21% penetration. In China, it's about 31% penetration. So it's happening. And that will change demand for fossil fuel. Likewise, as we build out the charging stations, we now have about 170,000 of them here in the United States. We're going to go up to the 500,000 before 2030. And that's going to address range anxiety that a lot of people have about buying an electric car. And so we're actively, through the IRA, President Biden is taking the initiative to push the new technologies as fast as we can, because all of them relate to reducing emissions, some of them in the power sector and others in the transportation sector and in the in the hard to abate sectors such as aluminum, concrete, and shipping is one of the hard to abate, by the way. So we're addressing very directly the nexus between climate, ocean, and the things we need to do to accelerate meeting our goal of a 43% minimum reduction by 2030. And that can be done. Actually can be done just deploying existing technology, even though we want hydrogen and we want more technologies. But reaching a 43% reduction is absolutely doable just deploying solar, wind, some of the geothermal, some more hydro, things like that. So we could do this. We're not deciding to do it. That's the problem. And so what we're doing is trying to push, cajole, plead, incentivize people to move in that direction. And we did that with President Biden hosted a summit virtually 3 times now at the White House, where in the first one we had President Xi and President Putin, pre-Ukraine obviously. But it's very important because that helped galvanize action in all the other major emitting countries, the largest economies of the world. Shipping, I went to Norway last year and spoke at an energy conference where we laid out our thought that the IMO needed to join this fight, and the IMO needed to be targeting the same thing. So we pushed for a 2050 net zero reduction. Lo and behold, last summer, the IMO did meet and did change its policy, and that's part of what's driving the shipping decisions that are being made now. I've had meetings with some of the owners of large shipping entities, and they have said specifically, they originally promised about 9 ships, 10 ships, that they were going to try and lease or build that would be carbon-free within the next period of time. They're at big double digits right now. And they're telling me that they're at a pace where they believe they will completely turn over the entire fleet, I think I mentioned this earlier, by 2050, well within the next 20 years is their target. That's an incredible step forward, and it shows what can happen when you get thoughtful CEOs together and even separate and begin to make decisions as to how they're going to meet their pledges of net zero 2050. And the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, which you have to begin to attack. So we're going to keep pushing that. I have confidence that, over the next year, I mean, my successor, John Podesta, who's very knowledgeable about this, will continue to push that. And, I'm going to try to continue. I'm going to personally stay involved in the climate issue, just pushing the private sector and trying to do more to mobilize the trillions that we need in order to accelerate the transition. That's going to be my non-governmental mission, but nevertheless, I think critical one to try to continue to move things forward.
I think everybody in this room probably agrees that is wonderful to hear. So one last question. These are serious and important issues, but the ocean is also a great source of joy and wonder. So just a slightly less serious, but I think important question is, what is your favorite thing about the ocean? I grew up in California. I went fishing every Saturday morning with my dad. There was no danger of overfishing. We caught 2 fish in like 3 or 4 years. But the memories of sitting on the jetty and feeling the ocean spray and just being together in this beautiful place was foundational for me. So I'd love to hear, and I know you were born on an island and grew up in a major port city. Maybe we can start with you, Mr. Europoulos.
I couldn't live without water, and I couldn't live without the ocean. There is only one thing that I hate about oceans, and this is jellyfish. And I have to say that we do suffer lately from this phenomenon in the Mediterranean basin exactly because of the overheat of the seas. So in order to be able to fully enjoy the seas, first of all, we need to be responsible vis-a-vis the seas.
Secretary Kerry.
Well, since I was a kid and dipped my toes into the water to hunt for clams when I was about 3 or 4 years old, I'd been passionate about the ocean. and do everything I can. I have a home that's right on the ocean, and blessed to have that. And, you know, I love all of the sailing and diving and other activities that are with it. The only problem is for us is we now have some great whites visiting us in Massachusetts. And so I'm a little more aware and careful. But the thing I love the most, to be honest with you, is being on a beach, big beach, hopefully, you know, in the evening, maybe alone, and listening to the waves crashing on the beach. That's the sense of time and perpetuity, if you will. And that's really beautiful.
We will see for your hotel in Athens then when you
Make sure you have a big beach to yourself.
a private beach for Secretary Kerry.
No.
Please join me in thanking the Foreign Minister and Secretary Kerry. Thank you.